trying to find some good time to record this review, and reviews are back. So for me to come back here and do reviews again, I kind of have to get into the swing of things. And I noticed the review is kind of late because Until Dawn came out actually weeks ago, and I did beat the game weeks ago, a few days after it came out. So this was really like, the only time. I told you guys I would do a review of Until Dawn. That would be my first review. And, I'm playing Metal Gear Solid 5 at the moment, so that game is going to take me a really long time to review because the game is so massive and so long. But we're going to get down here to the review, okay? So, just getting back into the swing of things and how it feels. Until Dawn is, one of those really cinematic kind of very movie-like kind of games. We've seen a lot of game developers try and tackle this, most notably David Cage and, his games like Heavy Rain, Indigo Prophecy, and there's also Beyond Two Souls, which was the most recent one. And so we've seen games of this, type of style that have come out, and they're trying to portray these cinematic levels of movie by adding some gameplay in there and allowing you to change the plot how you see fit. So Supermassive Games comes in here and they develop Until Dawn. It was originally supposed to be a PS3 exclusive for PlayStation Move, and due to some development difficulties and whatnot, and the game basically got kind of rebooted and reworked as a PlayStation 4 exclusive for the DualShock 4. With some motion control integration if you wanted that. For your game. So it's really important to, right off the bat, tell you guys that you have to, in order for this game to be an enjoyable experience, you have to go in there expecting what it truly is offering, alright? Because if you go into this game expecting it to be a horror game, like something along the lines of Outlast, Alien Isolation, or even The Evil Within, you're not going to get that, right? I wouldn't even really call it horror because the game is not even that scary, really. It's very rarely does it have really scary moments. The game really just is tense a lot of the times. And so you'll be going around the levels and going and playing through these characters, and you're not going to necessarily feel scared for what's lurking around the corner, but you're going to have this feeling of tension and danger that's going on. And in that respect, I think the game does really well. It's a very atmospheric kind of heavy game. They set up a lot of atmosphere in the beginning. And so if you go into this expecting it to be more of a thriller rather than a horror game, sort of like a thriller like along the lines of Disturbia, this game is really supposed to be a tribute to these classic horror movies from like the 80s and 70s. And its premise is really sort of in awe of that, because you have these 8 friends who go on this annual winter getaway up into this lodge that one of their friends' parents own, right? And they kind of go in here, and at the beginning of the game, you played through this event that happens in the past. All these friends are kind of getting back together after this traumatic event, and they sort of are all trying to kind of forget what happened and have a good time. But something else kind of happens. There's this serial killer guy who's kind of been lurking around the cabin woods, and who tries to basically give these friends as much of a hard and difficult time. Right off the bat, that kind of sounds very cliche, very cheesy, and that's kind of what the point is. That's what they were going for, and you have to realize that when going into this, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. And if you go into it expecting a serious horror game, you're going to come away vastly disappointed and kind of bored, because it's not really that scary at all. What it is, though, is a very good demonstration of the cinematic quality of how far we've come with video games to this day. So the story, to be honest, although it sounds cliche, does have a twist that comes out about halfway through the game. And it is actually pretty exciting. I actually really like this twist. Again, the game takes about 2 to 3 hours before things really start, getting amped up and getting really tense. So you're going to be playing and walking around, and the game sets up itself for about 2.5 to 3 hours, and then, shit starts hitting the fan. So you have to kind of stick in there for a little bit before the game starts getting really exciting, but when it does give you that really high tense feeling. Graphically speaking, alright, Until Dawn is one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Until Dawn, it really prides itself on facial character animations, alright? Kind of like David Cage does with Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls. And so the characters look really detailed. We're talking extremely, extremely detailed. I'm going to have some screenshots going through here, and I want you guys to take a look at these screenshots. all these screenshots are in-game footage, and when you look at the lighting and when you look at the character detail, I mean, they modeled individual hairs on the character's arms, and they stick out. They're fully tessellated and everything, and you can see all this, and it's some of the most unbelievable detail that you've ever seen. In fact, Until Dawn's graphics are the best thing that this game has to offer. The game just looks fantastic. However, due to this beauty and all this, you know, amazing realistic dense textures and all the stuff that they have to render, it does take a hit on the game's frame rate. The game runs at an average 25 frames per second, and it's very often it dips to about 20 frames per second. And here's the interesting thing is, even though the game's frame rate runs at about 20-25 frames per second normally, the game doesn't allow you to control the camera whatsoever. And because it doesn't allow you to control the camera, everything's kind of fixed, and all you can do is control the character movement. You very rarely notice the game's frame rate being an issue at all. I mean, you'll notice it when you're walking around. Okay, the snow's kind of choppy as it's falling around, and you know, everything like that. But when things start moving, and when you're watching, and since you're not able to control the camera and any of the motion that's going on in the game except the character's movement, everything looks just fine, and it all just flows fine. So even though the frame rate's horrendous, you don't notice it half the time because it's a quick time event. You don't have control of the camera, and everything's just fixed. You know, again, you'll see the snow kind of skip around the screen if you're looking at it, but motion blur usually takes care of that most of the time. So if they allowed you to control the camera, oh yeah, it'd be awful because everything would be like chop, 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 choppy. So, but yeah, the character animations here are the most beautiful animations. It's like, here's the tip of the Uncanny Valley. We're like right here. And you can see some of these screenshots that I put up. Those people look real, but they're in-game. And that's just incredibly... It's just awesome, you know, to kind of know that, okay, how far we've come in terms of visuals. Now, gameplay of Until Dawn is very... Again, it's a cinematic game, so you know how these games play, you know? They're very kind of light on gameplay, they're very quick time event heavy, and they're very much about you walking around in a very controlled environment, looking for things and whatsoever. And Until Dawn is no exception. Most of the time you're going to be walking around, you're going to be picking up objects, you're going to be picking up a game, or whatever. You pick up a game, you're going to be looking at the game, flip the game around, read something on the back, and then that's it. And this is what you do for about the first 2 to 3 hours of the game. You'll be just walking around, picking up stuff. When the game starts to get going, though, it does get a little bit more exciting because, you know, QuickTime events, even though a lot of people don't see them as necessarily gameplay, they do add to the tension because of how cinematic the game is. If you can get your mindset that you're kind of watching a movie, kind of playing a game, you know, kind of like a hybrid between the two, if you can get your mindset into that right format, then the gameplay will be perfectly fine for you. For me personally, I like those cinematic type of games. I think they're a breath of fresh air for normal monotony that we get with games like FPSs and action games and stuff like that. And so for me, I didn't really mind the quick time events and the exploration, but that's really all this game has to offer. Just get past the first 2 to 3 hours, and then the game starts getting interesting. And there are elements in the game where you have to kind of stand still, right? Because you're either being watched or you're hiding or something like that, and so you have to stand still. And so the game requires you to not move your controller at all. Now the issue with this is that you'll be, you know, holding your controller, right? And then most of the time when, you know, when we play games, maybe we'll readjust, maybe we're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, all right? We'll go like this, or we'll, you know, we'll hold the controller with one hand when we think we're watching something. You know, it's like generally our general movement is to readjust and to fidget and whatnot, and that's just generally what we do. By the time it says stand still, you're already readjusting yourself, or you're already moving the controller, doing something. And so what happens is, like, it says stand still, you're already moving, and it says immediate fail. There's no way that the game doesn't have a game over screen, right? It just continues. And so it was kind of frustrating because I was like, what? I was just readjusting myself. I didn't know that I was supposed to have to stand still. And so what I did a few times is I restarted the checkpoint. I was like, okay, I can see this, and then I'll stand still. And I stood perfectly still, and I passed that stage, and that's how I did it. But it was just frustrating because the game doesn't give you a heads up. You kind of are just sitting there, and it's like, those are like automatic fails almost. So there is another issue in terms of the story of the game. The game's around 8 hours long. It's around 8.5 hour experience or so. but I really feel like the ending of the game was kind of rushed because you're playing the game, right, and you get to like the last area and it's like really tense, right? You're like, oh, really tense, really tense, really tense, and it just ends, and you're like, oh, that's it. You know, the game needed like an extra 2 hours or so to really flesh it out or to really build up this huge finale, because there's no build up to the final stage. It's just kind of like you're in this high tense moment, you escape, that's it. It's like it just ends. There's no. It's like it's no build up to the point where, you know, you're like, oh, this is the final area. Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where when I completed the game, I didn't even know that was the final area of the game. In addition, some characters kind of get written off quickly towards the end, and you don't really get, like, you know, a satisfying conclusion with some of them. And Until Dawn really prides itself on characters here, because the characters are most of them are immediately unlikable, and you know, they hired professional actors here to reprise their roles. And you know, it's kind of interesting. You see on the cover and most of the game screens that Hayden Panettiere's her character is like the face of Until Dawn, right? It's like she's almost the main character, but she's really not. And I can see why they put her character on, like, you know, the arts. Her character is the best one out of everyone. Her character is the most mature. She's the most likable, and she's the one that you most care for during the course of the game. Most of the characters that come here are immature and very very just dumb and rude and bitchy. They're not likable characters. It's almost interesting because there's a few characters which are unlikable at the beginning of the game. Then you go through all the shit in the game, and then you end up liking them. It's kind of like they redeem themselves. So there's a few characters who redeem themselves through the events of the game. But then there's some characters that you just hate to the bitter end, and it's almost like you don't necessarily have care for them whether they live or die. Personally, with my playthrough, only 2 people died with my playthrough. My best friend actually completed the game for the first time, and everyone survived. You know, he was able to save everyone, and he did really well. So it's not impossible, but your choices here, even the littlest choices, do have dramatic effects on the game, and that's where the game really shines, is that little choices can dramatically change the future. Whether it's through small nuances in dialogue or whether it's something much larger. Overall, I think Until Dawn is an enjoyable game. Will I ever play it again? Very unlikely. So I don't think, maybe years down the road, if I'm like, I'm bored. Oh, I remember Until Dawn. I haven't played it in a really long time. Maybe I'll play it again. You know, something like that. But the game is a good, you know, good time to kind of just sit down and play through once. And overall, it was an enjoyable experience, even though the game kind of ended very short-paced, and the characters, most of the characters were unlikable. I mean, the first 2 hours of the game, it's like every other line has to do with sex, you know, and it's like every other line. It's kind of like thrown into your face. It's like, these guys want to fuck, she wants to fuck, he wants to fuck, they both want to fuck. And it's like every single time, every single other line is just sex. And so if you kind of get past the first 2 to 3 hours, even though it's a bit, you know, off-putting, and then you'll just really, really enjoy the game. So overall, Until Dawn, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5, alright? Because I like the twist, alright? But the twist also reveals some plot holes, too. And that's what kind of keeps the game... Like, I loved Beyond Two Souls. That was like a perfect score for me. I loved Heavy Rain. That was a perfect score for me. And those plots really were well-written plots. And there's a plot twist in Until Dawn that reveals plot holes. It's almost like... It's like, you know, two people can't be in the same place at once. But it's kind of like, when they reveal this plot twist, it's like... Wait, if that happened, then how did this happen? And this makes no sense. Why was he here and then immediately over there? And it's kind of like, it reveals these plot holes. So, minus a few plot holes, minus the fact that Until Dawn has a really kind of slow start, it is a really enjoyable experience, and I did have a lot of fun playing it, and I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I think it was a pretty decent game. Alright, that was my review of Until Dawn. Hope you guys liked it. Let me know what you guys think of the game, and yeah, give me some time for Metal Gear Solid 5. I'm still playing the game. I'm only 6% completion. 13 hours in, 6% completion, so go figure. The game's going to be really long. So, alright, I'll see you guys back later. Thank you all for watching my review. Let me know how I did on the review. I'm going to try and edit these more in the future. I'm going to try and do green screens and things like that. So just give me some time, but I'm going to try and really put some effort into these, alright? Have a good one, guys. I'll talk to you later. See ya.